27th of April this year also marks 27 years of democracy here in South Africa. In an opinion piece for the Business Day this week, political economist Moeletsi Mbeki says these years have shown us the key characteristics of our democracy. And it's not a real democracy, he says, as wealth and power remain in the hands of a few, mainly Afrikaner and African elites. Mbeki also makes the point that South Africa is the most wealthy, non-oil producing African state. His point is that all of us should be wealthier and happier than we actually are. And a key reason we are not is that elites dominate and our democracy has failed to transform the system. Moeletsi Mbeki is the Deputy Chairperson of the SA Institute of International Affairs. Wits University joins me now. Thank you so much for your time. So you say we've had 27 years to get a sense of what our democracy looks like. What would you say are the key characteristics?
Yes, one of the important characteristics in terms of the mass of the South African voters is that they don't think that the elections or democracy has changed much in terms of their own well-being and in terms of their own welfare. So what we're seeing happening in South Africa is that the number of people voting who are qualified to vote is actually declining and declining and declining. So that is a bad sign to me anyway, that actually democracy has not delivered or has delivered only to a certain minority what it had promised it would deliver. And a big part of our population feels that democracy has not delivered the promise that it had made to them. This creates actually an unstable situation, because then you have a large number of people in South Africa who are feeling dissatisfied that they are not benefiting from the change, which, remember, these people fought for the change. Many people tend to think that democracy was brought about by a political party or the ANC. Actually, democracy was brought about by the large numbers of people of South Africa who defied the rule of the apartheid regime and compelled it to come to the conference table, and they paid huge price for that. So they are now. We are seeing this disappointment.
Absolutely. You write that democracy is mostly a mirage. It's failed to restructure the class system. And you explain how the system of forced labor was handed to the Afrikaner elite in 1910, and they simply handed it over to the African elite in 1994. You blame nationalism, and actually, of course, African National Congress, Nationalist Party. Explain what nationalism means in this context and why it's not done us any favors in terms of spreading the wealth to more people, because as you write also, we're a wealthy country.
Yes, nationalism is really a grievance movement, but it's a grievances against a certain ruling class or a certain ruler or rulers. In our case, of course, the ruler was Britain. Which set up the colonial system in the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century. Now, the nationalists, both the Afrikaner nationalists and the African nationalists, who set up the political parties, the main political parties of South Africa, which is the African National Congress and the National Party, they felt aggrieved that the benefits of the colonial system, like mining industry, that they were not getting these benefits. The British were keeping these benefits for themselves. So they felt excluded, so they set up the parties, and that's what nationalism was about. It was to be included in the system, but not to change the system. Now, we all know that the colonial system was never designed to benefit the majority of South Africans. It was actually designed to exploit the majority of South Africans. But these two elites, the Afrikaner elites and the African elites, wanted to be included and eventually did get included, the Afrikaner elite in 1910 and the African elite in 1994. But the structure of the economy and the structure of social and class relations that the British had put in place remains intact. For example, the migrant labor system, which is a lethal system, for example, in terms of spreading infectious diseases, remains exactly as the British had designed it in the 19th century in the diamond mines in Kimberley.
So where does that leave us? I mean, I listened to you, and it sounds like you're saying the structure is all wrong. Are you saying that we should move towards what the sort of radical economic transformation brigade is saying? People who say everything must be nationalised and everything must be absolutely changed. What are you proposing to fix us, to make us wealthier and happier?
Well, certainly not from what I can see from the... Remember, the Radical Economic Transformation Brigade, they were the government of South Africa during the Zuma administration. So they can't come up now and say, oh, just because Cyril Ramaphosa is president and no longer Zuma and themselves, that they have a different economic policy. So, no, these are the infighting with the ANC, but they actually haven't got a different economic system. What we have to do in South Africa, we have to start and review, for example, our mining industry. The backbone of the South African economy, because it's so important as a contributor to our exports, remains the mining industry. And the mining industry, the way it operates, for example, with the migrant labor system, uses a lot of compulsion. It imports a lot of technology. The mining industry, for example, if you look at the equipment that is used there, most of it is imported, especially from Sweden. Now, why is this equipment not being made in South Africa? Yeah. And you can go on and on. And
in many ways, those are questions that, sorry to jump in there, but those are questions that the government is asking. We know that there's a big push to improve manufacturing, for example. And at the moment, in an attempt to revive our economies, a sort of downward trajectory, the plan is to create massive infrastructure projects with public-private partnerships. Is that the right vehicle that will help to create more jobs for more people?
Well, it depends what the infrastructure is doing and how do you build that infrastructure. We can import equipment from the United States, we can import equipment from Japan, from Germany, to build an infrastructure. Now, yes, we benefit from the infrastructure, but we don't manufacture the equipment. So it means you are not setting up a sustainable long-term manufacturing industry, which then requires you to train the artisans, to train the engineers, to train the managers, to build up a sustainable industry, to build up an infrastructure. If I can give you an example, in South Africa, our biggest let's say, yellow goods company is Bell Equipment. But that's more or less the only company that is South African, is Bell Equipment. Most of the other yellow goods equipment, like Caterpillar, Komatsu, and so on and so forth, is imported equipment. So now that is not industrialization. You may get a road, but you don't industrialize the economy.
I've got to ask you, as we head to the 27th anniversary of our democracy, where you've listed a litany of problems, we have seen a growing black middle class, for example. We do see many poor people getting social grants, which you've described as voting fodder. I'm not sure if that means you're against a social grant system or not, but are we poised, perhaps, to change things, to make things more equitable? We are one of the most unequal countries in the world. We've all spoken about how COVID has highlighted the problems. Do you think there's the will and the ability to make things more equitable?
No, there's absolutely no will. The ruling party benefits from the existing system, which is the central thesis of the article that was published in Business Day today. If you look at inequality, the measure of inequality in South Africa, the Gini coefficient, actually we are more unequal today than we were in 1994. Which shows that democracy has not brought equality to South Africa. It has exasperated inequality. However, as you point out, there's a small black middle class which has mushroomed during this period. They have benefited. But if you look in terms of the real numbers, this is a small group compared to the poor people who form at least 50% of our population who are unemployed and are living in poverty.
Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking indeed. Moeletsi Mbeki is Deputy Chairperson of the SA Institute of International Affairs at Wits University.